Advocates of the theory of recovered memories say people can repress horrible experiences to the point that they need counseling to remember them. This movement has stirred enormous controversy and resulted in innocent people being jailed. Are these memories real, or have they been suggested by therapists? Critics say psychiatrists treating patients claiming repressed memory leaned too heavily on hypnotism and similar techniques. Not only did they trust their patients' memories, they interpreted those memories, sometimes too creatively.
Psychotherapy that involved hypnosis or dream interpretation or guided imagery, imagination exercises, suggestive reading material, all of these things can lead a person to think they have a memory or a series of memories for horrific experiences when in fact those memories aren't real.
Hypnosis is the power of suggestion. Nothing more, nothing less.
Justin Trans, a stage hypnotist, works in Las Vegas. In his act, he has hypnotized thousands. An experience he feels gives him insight into the power of hypnosis and the human psyche.
Everybody is really in hypnosis all the time. Billboards, TV, movies, somebody's always trying to get us to buy something or to do something, or the media wants us to think a certain way. So we're always being bombarded with suggestion. So we're always in a hypnotizable state. The strongest suggestion gets in.
When he's on stage, Trans uses the power of suggestion to encourage members of his audience to participate.
Stand up! Let those hands, people! Those hands going, come on! I'm looking for fun people. People with great imagination, lots of animation.
Justin explains how he reads cues from his audience.
1, 2, 3, on this stage now!
What I'm looking for are people that I can work with easily. People that I can get to stand up when I ask them to stand up, sit down when I ask them to sit down, look left, look right, and just following along with what I want them to do.
Now turn like this real fast and keep turning. More and more. Now go woo, 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 woo. Woo, woo, woo. Turn, 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 turn. Freeze, stuck, don't move.
And once I see that I have their attention and their focus, then I work my magic, for the lack of a better word, on them.
Right, lay down, don't think, let go. Let go, sleep, pow, let go, don't think, let go. You slip in.
A lot of people come into the show very skeptical. They don't believe. But when they leave, after seeing their friend or family member or themselves, now they believe that hypnosis is real.
Most scientists deem stage hypnotism to be a gimmick. They say it only works on people vulnerable to dissociation.
Suggestion is an important part of hypnosis because someone who is not suggestible cannot be hypnotized.
When people try to hypnotize someone for the purpose of extracting what they think are buried memories, you end up with a situation where you sometimes suggest to your respondent the information that you think you're looking for. And it leads people to develop false beliefs and false memories.
In a 1983 California case, operators of a daycare center were charged with hundreds of instances of ritual sexual abuse. As in many such episodes, the allegations were shown to be fabricated. During counseling, child therapists convinced the kids to expand upon stories of abuse.
What happened in the McMartin case and other cases like it is it's an example of what is referred to as stimulus priming in psychology. Once you start questioning children, you're in a real dangerous situation because we now know from all sorts of good evidence, experimental evidence, empirical evidence, that children are extremely capable of generating the most incredible stories and make them seem very real and act as though they're very real.
Even so, counselors urge that childhood memories be respected, studied, and when necessary, investigated as crimes.
Many times the people have some memories of what had happened to them as children, but not a full memory because the trauma that the adults are instilling in them the adults are continuously telling the child, you won't remember this, this isn't happening to you, I'm not doing this.
Those who believe in repressed memories claim such programming is epidemic. They say evil has become a family business.
People were reporting that their families were practicing Satanism, that they had practiced Satanism for many years, many generations in fact, and that they were being handed down and indoctrinated with a set of belief systems that most of us would find extremely irrational and crazy-making.
There are all kinds of reports from the satanic abuse experts of cases where children were killed, and yet neither in the United States nor Canada did law enforcement agencies ever find cases of children who were missing under such circumstances.
Neil Brick's accounts of his childhood fit Walker's description.
I have recollections of being in the basements during the rituals where people were killed, put on crosses. You didn't want to be in the middle of a circle in a satanic ritual. It wasn't, you didn't want to be chosen. You did anything not to be chosen.
Though horrifying, these anecdotes do not persuade skeptics that ritual abuse is real.
There was a time, 30, 40 years ago where people didn't believe children. Suddenly, in the last 20 years, people are starting to say, children don't lie. You should always listen to them. The problem is that it's not a matter of them lying. It's a matter of them generating fantasies, not necessarily pleasant ones.
The suffering is real, the symptoms are real, but the question that you need to ask is, how did the patient get that way? Did they get that way because of prolonged, horrific childhood abuse, maybe satanic ritual abuse, or did they get that way because of influences on the part of the people who were treating them and influences on the part of the society?
So now we realize that this was all just a large collective hysteria where people fed on each other and came to believe in something and convinced some law enforcement people even that such conspiracies existed.
Whatever their basis in fact, these experiences are genuine to those who claim them, say repressed memory advocates.
Listen carefully and recognize that what you might be hearing is the way a severely traumatized person has put it together. You can actually listen between the lines and figure out the true story, I think, very often.
If repression really existed, and again, I don't believe that it does based on the evidence I've seen, then any one of us, as happy and healthy as we may be, could have been sexually abused, we would have no way of knowing.
I had to survive. I had to go to school. I had to eat. I had to live. So I had to bury it. It actually makes perfect sense in terms of how one could forget something for a long period of time that's so horrible. It makes perfect sense in terms of survival.
They learn what their therapist wants them to say. They learn the theories. They learn the symptoms. And they incorporate this and respond, not necessarily deliberately, not necessarily as a lie, but they're influenced to behave, to respond in this way.
False memories, they can be planted like any little flower.
What if it never really happened? It was just a figment of your imagination.
In some cases, you can remember things that maybe you've blocked. It's too painful.
I think it would be very difficult to recover those memories.
As far as blocking it out, I think that can happen.
I do believe you could be hypnotized to remember things.
You can believe them, I don't.
The notion of recovered memory begs a much larger question. How does the human brain work? Until we better understand this 3-pound computer that fits inside our head, we had best proceed with caution. Some people say they can visualize events and objects too far away to be seen by the naked eye. For those who believe in remote viewing, the mind is a sending and receiving unit, a compact, complex mechanism capable of reaching out, even involuntarily, to deliver and collect information.
Remote viewing is the act of being able to describe anything, anytime, any place using just your mind and pen and paper.
Prudence Calabrese is in the business of remote viewing. Calabrese and her associates have been called upon to find hidden money, fugitive financiers, and missing persons.
Remote viewing can be used to target literally anything. You can look at locations and describe the people and events and structures there. You can use remote viewing to describe the complete psychological makeup of a person. Anything is open to remote viewing.
Remote viewing is an outgrowth of older methods of telepathic communication and ESP, both popular during the 19th century. Around the world, many people believed that they could send and receive messages solely through the power of their mind. Today's remote viewers feel they can visualize the present and foretell the future. They say the mind is the ultimate communication tool.
Remote viewing itself is very structured and fairly scientific. It involves particular blinding protocols, and that's the definition of remote viewing. Those particular protocols put on this intuitive psychic kind of activity.
The scientific community of today does not believe that telepathic communication exists.
I think that these experiences come about through perfectly normal means, that people are not getting information via telepathy, even though they come to have an experience which makes them think that they have. The fact is that over the last 125 years at least, all these efforts, no matter how careful they've been, have failed to produce a single replicable demonstration of these abilities.
The reason these studies come up short, scientists say, has to do with the limits of the brain's ability to generate energy.
What we know about the brain is that the energy that's emitted from the brain, by the time you get within a few centimeters of the skull, there's nothing there to pick up. We have to use unbelievably powerful amplification tools to record brain waves from the skull because of the very low energy.
We don't know if different objects that you're viewing actually give off some kind of a force or energy field and the remote viewer is reading that field, or if the remote viewer truly is using their mind to literally travel to the place to describe what's there.
Remote viewing got a serious hearing from the U.S. government during the latter days of the Cold War. Intent on penetrating the USSR, military intelligence officials were open to any possibility. They enlisted the aid of Russell Targ of the Stanford Research Institute.
We had demonstrated that it's possible for a person sitting in the laboratory to describe and experience what's going on in a distant place. We then took those data to the Central Intelligence Agency.
Targ's institute handles psychic espionage for the Central Intelligence Agency and other government entities. Targ, a laser physicist, headed Project Stargate. Because he led those who sought to wage the Cold War with their minds, Targ became known as the father of remote viewing.
The government would come to us in applications cases and say, here's some geographical coordinates, latitude and longitude, what does it look like and what's happening at that distant place. Part of the remote viewing that we see in the laboratory is a mind-to-mind connection between a person at a distant site and the psychic in the laboratory. But the images that are picked up are generally not crystal clear.
Skeptics give psychic warriors an A for optimism, but an F for results. They say the concept was too much of a mental stretch.
The original idea was that if people have these powers, wouldn't it be great to be able to use them as a military tool? And so some of the projects involved people trying to discover what was going on in the Soviet Union by means of extrasensory perception.
Alcock requires an effort that set remote viewers to the task of blowing up Russian armored vehicles by staring at a photo of a tank. When the Soviets learned of the scheme, they put their own destructive thinkers to work.
If one mind's trying to blow up a tank and the other mind's trying to prevent it, I don't know what would happen. It becomes rather fanciful at that point.
Targ says he and his colleagues had many successes. One particular attempt had great results.
This illustration was one of the trials that we did for the CIA in the early part of our program, where we were given geographical coordinates, latitude and longitude, of some place in the Soviet Union. This is the drawing made to put on paper his mental impressions of what was going on at the geographical coordinate that the CIA gave us. On this side, we have a blow-up of the crane at that site shown in satellite photography.
To explain how remote viewing works, Targ invokes the principle of non-locality, a term used in physics for links between things that seem to be separated. Researchers have conducted tests of the non-locality principle and have shown that polarization in one photon may appear in another photon far from the original.
Both the photons connection and our psychic connections are manifestations of the fact we live in an interconnected world.
Physicists stress that the theory of non-locality is in relation to subatomic particles traveling near the speed of light, and that there is no scientific evidence that they have any relationship to remote viewing or telepathy.
It's interesting, but it's irrelevant to the question of whether there has been demonstration that there is extrasensory perception, which can be demonstrated independent of any theory if it exists.
Ray Hyman finds fault with claims that remote viewing has proven itself. He observes scientists can't consistently reproduce the results of remote viewers.
But what you look for is some reliable ability of this person who's doing this to do it under different circumstances. No matter how controlled it is, if you're using the power of your mind, it shouldn't matter. All of that material has no value in science, because either it was anecdotal or it was, again, something that occurred once and couldn't be repeated.
In 1995, the government shut down Project Stargate.
The reason replication is very, very important, especially in ESP type of phenomena. Remember, the burden of proof, see, I'm being asked all the time is, how do I explain away their results? Really, this is the wrong question. The question is, for them, the burden of proof is on a claimant. If their claims of remote viewing were right, it would really be a revolution in science.
Its advocates describe remote viewing as a form of mental telepathy. People who claim this sixth sense say they can visualize what goes on a world away. U.S. government officials like the idea so much they experimented with the technique during the Cold War. Others call the concept far-fetched. Remote viewing, valid technique or merely mind games? Going into the 21st century, one of the leading proponents of remote viewing is Prudence Calabrese, founder of Transdimensional Systems. Calabresi's firm specializes in finding lost persons and locating business assets. Calabrese sees remote viewing as a basic human tool.
Everybody's had those moments where they know someone is staring at them and they turn around and that person is looking at them. Or you know that someone's going to call you on the phone, or you have a sense of a friend. You haven't thought of your friend in a while, and the phone rings and it's your friend. Everybody has these moments every single day.
The war on terror extends to remote viewing. The FBI has contracted with Calabrese. Transdimensional's method is simple. Once a target is chosen, a viewer focuses on that subject.
When a viewer is in the middle of a session, they rely on their intuition primarily. They listen to their body and to their mind for the subtle pieces of data that come to the surface. Some of these pieces of the data may be energetics, or they may be colors or tastes or textures or actual thoughts of individuals at the site of the target.
Experts assert these claims run counter to the science we live by.
In these studies of remote viewing and so forth, the more carefully controlled it is, the less likely it is that you find the effect. And so the problem with parapsychology is not only does it go against so much of what is very, very strongly supported science. So that some of the strongly supported science must be wrong if the parapsychological notions are right.
Calabrese points to her associations with government and other reputable clients as evidence that remote viewing is here to stay and gaining credibility all the time.
Remote viewing will eventually be taught in grade school, and it'll be a technique that children learn. They'll learn to honor their own intuition and to use it very closely and to develop it as they grow. And we feel that eventually we will be a telepathic society.
I mean, science developed as a way to help protect us from self-delusion. We can explain all the experiences that people have, such as telepathy and so forth, not in terms of some strange power that goes beyond science, but rather in terms of the way our own quite wonderful minds work, and they work sometimes without us completely understanding how they work.
I do believe in ESP.
I think there is a certain amount of truth in it.
ESP, I don't think that it really works.
I really don't believe in that psychic phenomenon.
And when someone does have an ability, I think it's few and far between that people don't want to believe it.
Could be that people can read minds.
I'm not so sure there's validity to it.
I think some people have it and some people don't. It's just a gift.
Scientific testing has failed to prove that remote viewing is a valid way to acquire information or influence events. After decades of experience, including official use by the federal government, the evidence just isn't there. It's natural to feel an attraction to concepts like remote viewing, repressed memory, subliminal communication, and certain uses of hypnotism. But as remarkable as the brain can be, we can't trust it entirely, as the data show. We'll be back soon with a scientific perspective on extraordinary phenomena. For the Critical Eye, I'm William B. Davis.